Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Susan Lopresti Wellness, Mind, Body, and Soul. This is the podcast where we talk about the highs, the lows, and everything in between when it comes to a woman's life, her health, and all aspects of navigating the midlife landscape. I'm your host, Susan Lopresti, and today I have a special guest with me. Her name is Nancy Griffin, and Nancy is the founder of Women Worth and Wellness. Nancy connects women and supports their journey towards healthier and financially empowered lives. From her beginning as a wealth advisor, she's grown to focus on holistic initiatives that cater to boomer women and their fabulous daughters and granddaughters. It's all about encouraging fearless leadership and creating communities rich in health, wealth, net worth, and self-worth, which is so important. All of those aspects are equally important. Nancy is a connector and an influencer. She attributes her success to personal courage, determination, and joy when focusing on women's health and wellness, hence creating Women Worth and Wellness. Nancy enjoys every opportunity to inspire and to inform women about their personal health and wealth, net worth, and self-worth, philanthropy, and legacy, so that women feel fabulous, generous, joyful, confident, and on top of their game every day. Nancy Griffin established Women, Worth, and Wellness in 1994 as a private client wealth advisor for her female clients and their families. Nancy continues to promote and inspire daring and caring leaders, encouraging them to step up and lead in the world, following in the footsteps from many other powerful women leaders in the past. Nancy's overall purpose is to connect and influence for positive impact every chance she gets. This is such a powerful and important thing that you are doing. Nancy, welcome to my podcast. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you. And I'd like to start with you telling me about your mom, because I saw on your website that she had a tremendous influence on you. So what was that story all about?
No, she was terrific. We used to play a lot of bridge, and she had her little arthritic finger, and she'd say, "You've always got to have a strategy. You've always got to have a strategy." I mean, she was wise beyond her years. She really was, but a really joyful person, a terrific musician, but always full of life and always loving to share her life every chance she could to bring joy to other people. She had a homemade jam business and she loved to give out little samples, little jars of jam. And it was almost like a little piece of gold that she was passing along to somebody else, which was terrific. But she died before I got into the wealth advisory business, which was most unfortunate because she was an investor herself. And how she decided whom to invest in was based on who was the CEO and what was that CEO's approach to running and leading their business. So always very, very astute. But up on my wall, I have a card that she gave to me for my birthday. And it was the last birthday before she died that fall. We know that heart disease is the leading cause of death for women, not breast cancer, but she was diagnosed with indigestion. And of course, sure enough, wasn't it heart disease? So she died in the middle of the night. We were all shocked, but it was exactly the way she would wanted to have died at the age of 83. But this birthday card, she said on the card, she said, "Nancy, I like this advice better than the birthday cards I saw." And that was the last birthday card I received from her in 1990. And it is just live each day to its fullest. And then it goes on and on and on. Be your best self, always be your best self. But the one phrase that I use often is love with all your heart and soul, believe those you love you. When you're faced with a decision, make that decision as wisely as possible. She said, indecision is like a cancer. Like, get on with it. Decide. If it's a bad decision, move on from there. If it's a good decision, obviously, you move on from there. But the one phrase that I use a lot is the moment of absolute certainty never arrives.
Wow.
And that's a really, really powerful statement because we always want the ideal. Well, guess what? You can't press a reset button and get the ideal. That moment of absolute certainty never arrives. So, really, really
Wow.
interesting.
What a wise woman. And I want to ask you, how long ago was it that she started to make investments? Because usually women, especially back then, they weren't involved. Like if you were in a marriage, the husband was always the one that was managing the money, right? And the woman was the homemaker, let's say. So that in itself says that she was a pioneer. How old was she, or how long ago did she start making these wealth
Well,
decisions?
my dad was always an investor. And in high school, I grew up on a farm. And in high school, if I missed the bus, he'd drive me to high school. And of course, we would always have a newspaper. And he'd call out the stock holdings that he had and ask me to tell him what it closed at the day before. So we were always surrounded with him as an investor. And I think once she started her own business of homemade jam, she had her own money. And once she had her own money, then she started to invest herself. And she used to subscribe to the Financial Post. Well, of course, in those days, everything came in the mail. So you can imagine how current the information was by the time it arrives.
Right.
But again, to my point, she'd read, that's where she would read about who the CEO of the company was and what was, and it was always a him, what was his investing strategy with that company? What products were he promoting? Was he promoting and, yada, yada, yada. The one thing that she was very proud of with her stock account was, and the proceeds coming from her jam business, was she took some money out and she bought her own piano, not a used piano, it was a brand new piano. And again, the manufacturer of this piano company was a Canadian company, and she really liked this fellow's approach to what he had created. So, yet again, invested in purchasing that piano and very proud of the fact that she paid for it with her own money. And our daughter, Julia, was a big, big favorite of hers. And of course, when she died, the piano was left to Julia, who now has two little girls who, like Julia, are taking piano lessons and playing the piano. So continuum is always important.
Oh, that's beautiful. That is really, really beautiful. So I'm assuming that you were raised in a family where you were financially always involved in the stock market, and I'm sure your dad was giving you great advice for saving money. So that's what brought you to create your own company. So now
Correct.
tell us about your company for women. Am I getting that correct?
Well, actually, you get a kick out of this. I was a wealth advisor. And
Okay.
as a wealth advisor, I created Women Worth and Wellness because a lot of my clients were women in families, not just single women by themselves. And you realize that women have a disproportionate amount of responsibility pertaining to their family's health and well-being. They're always the ones that are expected to know about how to look after the parents and the kids and your staff and yourself. And so that's when I said, you know what? Before we start talking about money, let's really focus on health as a cornerstone. So that's when I started to focus equally on health and wealth, because as a wealth advisor, a lot of what you do, in addition to the investment portfolio, is health related. What happens if you have a critical illness? So, critical illness insurance. What happens if your spouse dies prematurely? That's when life insurance comes in. So, a lot of that fabulous wealth scenario is health related. So, all the way along, I would partner with not for profit, health related organizations focusing on women's health. For example, Heart and Stroke Foundation what are the symptoms of heart disease for women, which is different from men often. We know that a lot of the research that has been done previously on heart disease was using male examples. And so it was just all about educating women. If something goes wrong, it really eats into their time to discover. So what I was doing was introducing them to learnings, but also new contacts, new go-to. If something comes up and you've got a question, you've already met that person. In Toronto, we have Women's College Hospital, which is world renowned. I did a lot of work with them, started their first golf tournament in 1994, and then in 1997, we had 144 golfers. So, really, really bringing, and of course, these organizations loved the connections with women because that's who they want to share their learnings with. But what I was about to say is one of my events. Okay, so I sold my wealth advisory practice, so all my clients, but the Women Worth and Wellness focus was a trademark brand. So I brought that out as a standalone business. So fast forward to now, I'm focusing on menopause with our Mount Sinai Hospital in Toronto because they've got a whole hot and bothered campaign, which really caught my attention. And I remember when I was going through menopause in my 40s, that's just at a time when your leadership is really starting to ramp up. And if some of these symptoms of menopause gets in the way of you feeling your best so that you can do your best, you often step back. And I thought women cannot afford to step back any longer.
Oh,
We need to have more women leading the way. And so anyway, decided I'd do some events. So as a result of that, I've been invited to be a guest speaker at an advisory conference. So most of the advisors who will be there will be male. There'll be some females. I asked the organizer, how much time do I have? He said 50 minutes, 50, 50 minutes. Oh my goodness. So I'm going to start off by saying, men, don't think you're not part of this because it's called Men Oh Pause, like hello.
yeah.
And so that's not until June, but I know I'm going to have a lot of fun putting this all together because, really now more than ever, women are really starting to talk about all their challenges and all the things that they may never have talked about publicly before. So
Yes, yes.
great opportunity.
I know Oprah Winfrey just did
Yes,
on Hulu a big thing, and Halle Berry, a lot of famous actresses were there.
yes.
Yes, excellent. And I'm so glad that women are really coming forward, stepping forward, and they are talking about this. And I had a woman on my podcast recently, Satori Shakur, and she was saying that, years ago, if a woman was in a meeting and she started with a hot flash, she would step out of the meeting to not show. And she was saying on my podcast, no, just sweat it out, dab your face and keep going. Don't let it interfere. And so it's so true. And that's so great that you're getting involved in that because women are not as shy about menopause. It used to be you would keep it quiet. Now let's talk about it. It's real and it's happening, and we can get through it because you do get to the other side. And there's a lot of things that we can do to manage it a lot better than like when our moms were going through it, let's say.
Well, I asked this one woman recently. Now tell me, I mean, because now we realize what about our mothers and their mothers? And she said, I just remember my mother going into the bathroom and not coming out for about 20 minutes. So, you hid away.
Yes, yes.
No more, no more.
No, no, that's great. What do you do with women?
What I do, the best thing that can happen to me is a wealth advisory individual, so a wealth advisor or a wealth advisory firm captures this because it is, I mean, just about in every scenario, there is a female. And who's paying attention to that female? And if it's a female, what is that female paying attention to herself? So I did a lot of work with this one advisor. He had been basically a pension fund manager and then decided after quietly being in the background managing money, he wanted to start his own wealth advisory practice. Very, very successful. So I saw that he'd taken a big ad in a magazine. I knew the ad would have cost him like $10,000 or whatever. So I approached him and I said, "Would you like to build your business with high net worth women?" He said, "Tell me more." So away we go. So he sponsored my events. So he would be front and center. And my dad always said the best sale is a third party sale. So as I got to know him, I'm telling all these women who have come to these events what a super guy he is. So he doesn't have to tell women himself what a terrific guy he is. And then all I would say is get a second opinion. I mean, you decide if you want to work with him or not, but get a second opinion. You can't go to anybody more qualified than this person and hear what he has to say. And I was never asking him to be accountable to me in terms of, who came on as a new client. If he kept on sponsoring my events, obviously the value proposition was in place.
Mhm.
But invariably, we would have our next event, and women would come up to me and kind of whisper and say, "I'm now a client of, and it's thanks to you." Well, that's perfect. That is absolutely perfect.
Yes.
So if we do a golf tournament, then we charge people. This menopause event that I'm doing, it will be a 1 hour virtual with some really, really top-notch people speaking. And people are paying $75 for that. But then coming out of that are terrific add-ons. We've got a cool and comfy fashion show at a high-end women's boutique a month later. We've got a draw for Mother's Day weekend in the county. Where I live is kind of like the Hamptons.
Uh-huh.
It's kind of a go-to location that's so beautiful and wineries and blah blah blah. So we've got a draw for Mother's Day weekend in the county. So that's kind of how we do it. We have sponsors. They participants often pay a nominal amount, and then we try to make a lot of good things happen as a result of it.
Wow, that's great. That really is great. I wanted to ask you, what advice would you give to a woman? Let's say she's in her 40s, 45, let's say, and she really doesn't have a financial plan at this point, whether she's married or not. But I'm thinking more of a single woman.
Mhm.
She's a working woman making a substantial income and she doesn't have much of a savings. How would you advise her at 45 years old?
Okay, well, if she's 45 years old, she's probably got another 50 years to live,
Right.
because we know women's life expectancy is increasing all the time. I think the most important thing is that you work with a trusted advisor. That is the most important thing, because a trusted advisor will give you all the guidance that you need to have so that you can survive and thrive. So the question is, well, how do I find a trusted advisor? I just had a conversation with these women who have an adventure podcast. And I said, think about skydiving. Like, you'll only skydive if that person that you're with is a trusted advisor.
Mm-hmm.
So often with money, women don't want to talk about money. Women are more likely to talk about sex than they are to talk about money because they're embarrassed they don't have more. They're embarrassed that they don't know more. And so that embarrassment gets in the way of getting connected with that trusted advisor. So, how you find a trusted advisor, if you don't already have one, is ask around. And if you have an opportunity to interview a trusted advisor, then ask them what their approach is to looking after a woman, because often women are discounted because it's like, oh my God, you wouldn't believe how much you didn't know, like just discounting and being disrespectful.
Mm-hmm.
But in addition to what is your approach, it's what is your attitude. If I'm the person who is doing the interviewing, then I've shared kind of my financial scenario. So then ask that person what their attitude would be towards helping me achieve the most. So there's a lot of conversation that needs to occur. But once again, to what we talked about earlier,
Mm-hmm.
women really need to step it up and own that conversation, because every penny is so important. And that trusted advisor is going to help that woman steward her wealth going forward.
Right. At what age would you recommend a woman start saving? I said 45, but would you start saving earlier than that? Like as soon
Yeah,
as yeah,
definitely. And the
yeah,
one thing I'm looking for is somebody who is a curriculum expert. Because with my Women Worth and Wellness brand, the suggestion, the request has been, okay, let's start at age 10, talking about your health, assuming you're going to live to be 95. So at 10, what do you need to know and what do you need to do? And at 20 and 30 and 40, all the way along. Same thing with wealth. Often that 10-year-old will have a weekly allowance. So what is the purpose of that allowance and what are the opportunities with that allowance? And then at age 20 and 30 and 40, all the way along. So I think starting when you're young as possible, and normally around 10 is when, I mean, it could be younger. Some kids, get the message sooner, but I think 10 is an ideal time to start. And there's quite a difference between a 10-year-old and a 20-year-old,
right.
and then a 20-year-old and a 30-year-old. So I think the sooner the better.
Right. Yes. Well, for myself, when I started working at 22, I always worked for a company that either had a 401k or some kind of an investment. And so
Wonderful.
that's what I always did. And then when I was about 42, I started to really put, like, in the beginning, I was putting like 3% of my salary for, but by the time I was in my 40s, I went to the max of
Wonderful.
what I was allowed to participate in my 401k. And it allowed me to retire at 61 years old because I was consistent with that. So, yeah, it's so important. I wanted to ask you also, you don't just talk about women's wealth, but health. So, a
Correct.
woman who's in her 30s, what advice do you give a woman who's in her 30s to start working on keeping her health? Let's assume that she's healthy at the moment.
Mhm.
What's your advice for her?
Well, if you're in your 30s and you're heading into menopause, and
Yes.
and I remember turning 39 and thinking, "Oh my goodness, I'm going to be 40. I'm going to be 192 years old when you're 40." Of course, now it's like a teenager.
Yes.
I think it's just increase your awareness of possible challenges that can come your way. We now know that there's a huge epidemic for loneliness. It's like a new disease. So for older people. So stay involved. Like enjoy your girlfriends, enjoy your adventures. Obviously, most women in their 30s are focused on some sort of athleticism, one way or another, and lots are doing marathons and those sorts of things. I think, just making your body move and keeping your mind really, really active is important. And in your 30s, you're possibly a new mother. And if you're a new mother, then keeping your kids active as well is important. So, my husband has a sister who's 94, and her advice is keep moving, like keep moving.
Yes.
So move, 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 and increase your awareness of potential health challenges that may come your way, and how do you prevent them, offset them.
Right. That's great advice. Definitely social connection, especially as we're getting older, is so important because if you're isolated, and I saw this a lot during COVID with some of my friends' moms who were isolated, they're widows, and they were in their house for months and months and months alone, and their mental state
Right.
declined tremendously.
Hmm.
More so than even their physical health was their mental health, and they didn't come back from it. And I'm
No.
talking about women that were in their late 80s and early 90s. But prior to COVID, they were so with it and just being isolated in their house every day for months, not going out, being afraid to go out, being in public. So everyone stayed in and stayed home, and that was really detrimental to their mental health.
And the world flipped. Like all of a
Yes.
sudden it flipped. You and I are Zooming now, and that was the biggest opportunity of all.
Yes.
But if technology didn't become part of their MO every day, then they just become more and more and more and more isolated.
Yes.
And of course, we know that there's incredible amount of fraud hitting on older people. And so that just causes you to become a turtle to an even greater extent. And that's the tragedy.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So, Nancy, do you have any final thoughts you'd like to leave women with as far as financial advice?
Well, you know what? I'm thinking about you because you have done an amazing job with your whole wealth scenario. So
Thank you.
now you're moving into the whole philanthropic legacy aspect of your life, which now becomes a whole new challenge because what do you care about most? And that's where the holistic aspect comes into play. What do you care about most? And how can I give back to those organizations that I care about most? And how do I know that that organization that I've selected will steward that wealth that I've directed to them? Well, so it's another whole new area of opportunity, but also increasing your awareness and understanding the options that are available to you. Really, really important. For example, I'm involved with the Rotary Club, and recently I had this big insurance policy, and my husband kept saying, we do not need all that insurance. Well, the most important thing is do not let it go. Do something really powerful with it. So I reduced it right down. The amount that was left, I put as part of my legacy with a donation to Rotary. Of course, they were delighted.
Oh,
And now I'm going to the International Convention this year and we'll spend some time on the whole foundation aspect. But I think, as more and more women earn more and are inheriting more, their
yes.
whole philanthropic opportunity becomes significant.
That's great advice.
So lots to pay attention to. And of course, Mackenzie Scott and Melinda French Gates are leading the way in terms of you've got all this wealth, what are you going to do with it?
Right. That's
So,
great advice.
thank you. So there you go. Nobody gets out of here alive, so we got to
No,
make every penny happen, which is the opportunity, and of course, to stay active and stay healthy.
yes. Also great advice.
Perfect.
Yes. Thank you, Nancy. I appreciate you coming on. I will put all of your information in the show notes where people can find you, reach out to you, get advice from you. And uh,
Perfect.
and I appreciate your time and everything that you're doing. I think it's wonderful. It really is. I'm
Well,
so
thank
happy
you.
you reached out to me.
And likewise to you. You keep up all your great work, which is super. You're an
Thank you.
excellent interviewer. Very, very gentle.
Thank you, Nancy. I appreciate that.
You're welcome. Have a
Uh,
great weekend.
You too.